I want to go back to a few of my observations from attending Apple's event last week. One thing I noticed was the crowd felt different last week versus prior events. Some of the faces that I typically see at these events, I didn't see. These may not be people that I talk to, but people that I always see. Because again, I've been attending Apple events for 10 years. Well, this past week, after last week's episode was published, I did a little bit of digging and I kind of went through social media, went through profiles to see, hey, this person typically goes to Apple events. Where are they at last week's event? At the same time, I went through different social media platforms, specifically Instagram, and I looked at those who did attend. What were the photos, videos from the event? Well, did they attend prior events? Is this something they typically do? And I got quite a few observations from that. My conclusion from looking at all of this is that my initial suspicion that this was a different event when it comes to that guest list is accurate. There was a pretty different guest list for last week's event. Those people who typically have gone to Apple events, a good number of them, I don't know how many, but a fair number, I think, did not attend this most recent Apple event. I don't know if this is an issue of being invited or they just didn't go. That I don't know. In addition, there were quite a few people who had never attended Apple events before. Last week was their first Apple event. And I could tell this because they had posted photos and videos from the event, but you didn't see that during prior events. They didn't attend WWDC. They didn't attend last September's event. What was a common characteristic among those accounts? They were influencers. They weren't even they weren't even gadget people. They weren't even tech reviewers. They were influencers that, if I had to sum up, would fit into this broader lifestyle category. So maybe they have content regarding travel, food, even things like architecture, but then they'll also talk about style, tech gadgets, etc. And there were quite a few of them. Thing with algorithms these days, you watch a few posts and you're engaging with those posts, you're going to get a lot of those posts. So you watch a few videos from Steve Jobs Theater, that demo room, they're going to keep coming and coming and coming. And that's how I discovered, wow, this guest list was actually pretty different. One thing we talked about last week is that there has been evolution in Apple's events and the guest list. So I don't want to make this sound like, oh, the guest list was always one way for 10 years and all of a sudden it's completely different. That's not the case. There has been a certain amount of evolution. We could go back to even events prior to when I started going to Apple events, say when the Apple Watch was unveiled. The guest list was changed. It was altered for that event where you had more people from non-tech verticals such as fashion, style, even those who traditionally focus on mechanical watches, they were invited to that Apple Watch event. In addition, there is change in the media landscape. I'm sure all of us can point to a few names that we used to follow quite a bit, and maybe they changed employers. Maybe they no longer cover Apple. Maybe they no longer cover tech for that matter. Those names aren't going to continue to be invited to Apple events. And that makes sense. So there is evolution going on. I just think there probably was a little bit of a more drastic change or a more dramatic change for this most recent event. Why? Look at the products. That's what I'm saying to myself. Look at the topic that Apple really wanted to push with this event, design. Now, of course, we're not just talking about how the products look, but what Apple's trying to go for in terms of new Apple Watches, new AirPods, new iPhones, a lot of hardware optimization, hardware efficiency, the goal to improve how we're using these devices. iPhone Air, iPhone Pro, that cosmic orange, I think Apple definitely wants to have fresh voices talking about those products. Voices that maybe traditionally are more from the style, more from the fashion side of things, and not necessarily tech. And I think going forward, I could see Apple continuing to want to do that and continue to go down that road. There are products in the pipeline that I suspect will play quite a bit in fashion, in style, in this idea of mass market luxury just redefined for Apple in the mid 2020s.